How the Bharatiya Janata Party won West Bengal. The complete story of a political earthquake. Part 1. The election that changed Bengal forever. Introduction. Few states in India have experienced political transformations as dramatic as West Bengal. For more than 3 decades, the state was synonymous with communist politics under the left front. When the era ended in 2011, many believed that Mamata Banerjee and the Trinamool Congress had established an equally durable political order. Between 2011 and the mid 2020s, the TMC appeared almost unbeatable. It defeated the left, reduced the Congress to insignificance, and successfully resisted the Bharatiya Janata Party's first major attempt to capture Bengal in 2021. Yet politics is rarely static. Every dominant political force eventually confronts the challenges of incumbency, organizational fatigue, corruption allegations, leadership succession, changing demographics, and shifting political and public expectations. Elections are not determined by a single issue, but by the interaction of dozens of political, economic, cultural, organizational, and psychological factors. Governments rarely lose power because of one mistake. They usually lose after years of accumulated dissatisfaction, while opposition parties spend years building the capacity to convert that dissatisfaction into votes. The BJP's eventual victory in West Bengal represented one of the most significant political developments in contemporary Indian politics. It demonstrated that even a state long considered resistant to the Bharatiya Janata Party's expansion could become electorally competitive through sustained organizational work, strategic campaigning, and changing voter preferences. It also marked the culmination of more than a decade of political investment rather than sudden electoral breakthrough. Understanding this election requires moving beyond simplistic explanations. It cannot be understood merely as a triumph of religious polarization, nor solely as a rejection of corruption, nor simply as an anti-incumbency wave. Each of these explanations contain elements of truth, but none alone explain the scale of political change. Instead, the BJP's victory emerged from the convergence of multiple developments that unfolded over many years. Organizational expansion occurred alongside demographic shifts. Corruption scandals coincided with economic dissatisfaction. National political narratives merged with local grievances. Regional leaders complemented central leadership. Social media campaigns reinforced booth level mobilization. Every element strengthened the others until they collectively altered Bengal's political landscape. Chapter 1. Bengal before the political revolution. To understand how the Bharatiya Janata Party eventually won Bengal, it is first necessary to understand why Bengal was historically considered one of the most difficult states for the party. Unlike northern and western India, Bengal possessed a unique political culture shaped by Bengal Renaissance, colonial administration, intellectual movements, partition refugee migration, communist mobilization, trade union activism, and literary traditions. Politics in Bengal was historically driven less by religion than by ideology. During the 20th century, the Indian National Congress dominated the early decades after independence. By the late 1960s, however, political instability created opportunities for communist parties. The left front, led by the Communist Party of India, Marxist, gradually established itself as Bengal's dominant political force. Beginning in 1977, the left front governed continuously for 34 years. This remains one of the largest democratically elected communist governments anywhere in the world. The left front fundamentally transformed Bengal's political structure. Land reforms redistributed agricultural land through Operation Barga. Village level political organization expanded dramatically. Trade unions became embedded in industrial relations. Party workers penetrated nearly every aspect of rural governance. Political identity became closely connected with party organization. The left's greatest strength was not merely ideology, its true strength was organizational discipline. Every village possessed local cadres, every district had party committees, every election was fought through detailed booth management. Political power flowed upward from an enormous grassroots machine. For decades, this machine proved extraordinarily effective. However, long periods in power often generate structural weaknesses. Political organizations became bureaucratic, cadres became complacent, corruption gradually increases. Internal competition declines. Local leaders become insulated from ordinary citizens. As decades passed, precisely these problems emerged within the left front. Industrial growth stagnated. Manufacturing investment slowed. Major companies increasingly chose other states. Young voters became less attached to communist ideology. Urban aspirations changed. The global economy changed. Information technology expanded elsewhere while Bengal struggled to attract comparable investments. Many citizens increasingly viewed the left as defending the status quo rather than creating new opportunities. This environment created an opening, the rise of Mamata Banerjee. Mamata Banerjee's political success was not accidental. She successfully positioned herself as the principal challenger to communist dominance. Yet the technocratic style associated with many established politicians, Mamata cultivated an image of personal simplicity, relentless activism, and direct confrontation while with the ruling establishment. She projected herself as a leader willing to physically confront injustice rather than merely criticize it in speeches. This image resonated across both urban and rural Bengal. The Trinamool Congress gradually united these diverse groups opposed to left. Former Congress supporters shifted towards the TMC. Rural voters, frustrated with local communist leadership, increasingly supported Mamata. Civil society organizations mobilized around land acquisition controversies. The Shingur and Nandigram movements became defining political movements. These movements fundamentally altered Bengal's politics. Many farmers believed industrial development was occurring without adequate consultation or compensation. The TMC successfully framed itself as the defender of ordinary citizens against an increasingly disconnected government. This narrative proved politically devastating for the left. After years of erosion, the left finally lost power in 2011. For millions of Bengalis, this election symbolized liberation from political stagnation. Expectations became extraordinarily high. Citizens expected administrative reform, they expected industrial revival, they expected employment growth, they expected reduced political violence, they expected cleaner governance. Every incoming government inherits expectations. Meeting them consistently over many years is considerably more difficult than generating them during an opposition campaign. The TMC's consolidation of power. Following its victory, the Trinamool Congress rapidly consolidated political authority across Bengal. Former left strongholds increasingly shifted towards TMC influence. Many local political workers changed party affiliations. Administrative structures adapted to the new political reality. The TMC successfully expanded welfare programs. Schemes directed towards women, students, farmers, and lower income households increased the party's social reach. These welfare initiatives became one of Mamata's strongest political assets. Many beneficiaries associated tangible improvements in their daily lives directly with the state government. At the same time, however, another political process was unfolding beneath the surface. As local power became concentrated within new networks, allegations of favoritism, extortion, political intimidation, and corruption gradually increased. Opposition parties accused local leaders of controlling contracts, recruitment, municipal administration, and access to government benefits. Supporters of the government often argued that these allegations were exaggerated or politically motivated. Nevertheless, over time, repeated accusations contributed to a growing perception that among many sections of the electorate that corruption had become systematic rather than exceptional. Political perception often matters as much as objective measurement. When voters repeatedly hear similar allegations over many years, confidence in institutions gradually declines. This process rarely produces immediate electoral consequences. Instead, dissatisfaction accumulates slowly until a triggering event transforms passive frustration into active political change. During the early years of TMC rule, no opposition parties possessed sufficient organizational capacity to capitalize on that dissatisfaction. The Congress continued to weaken, the left front struggled to recover from its historic defeat. Only one party continued expanding steadily. That party was the Bharatiya Janata Party. The transformation that followed would fundamentally alter Bengal's political future. Part 2. The Rise of the Bharatiya Janata Party in West Bengal. Chapter 2. From political margins to principal challengers. For most of its history, the Bharatiya Janata Party occupied only a marginal position in West Bengal politics. Unlike in North and Western India, where the party steadily expanded through the late 20th century, Bengal remained outside its traditional electoral geography. The BJP lacked a deep organizational network, had very few influential regional leaders, and struggled to connect with an electorate shaped by decades of communist politics and later by the rise of the Trinamool Congress. In the parliament, elections of the 1980s and 1990s, the BJP's vote share in Bengal remained extremely small. Most elections were contests between the left front and the Congress. Even after the formation of the Trinamool Congress in 1998, the BJP was viewed primarily as a junior ally rather than an independent political force capable of challenging for power. The party's weakness was structural rather than temporary. Electoral success requires more than popularity at the national level. It requires thousands of local workers, polling agents, district organizers, booth committees, fundraising networks, voter databases, communication systems, and candidates trusted by local communities. In Bengal, the BJP lacked almost all of these components. National leaders occasionally campaigned in the state, but campaigns alone cannot replace organizational depth. Elections are won through millions of individual voter contracts made over months and years rather than a few large rallies. Recognizing this reality, and the BJP gradually shifted from treating Bengal as an unwinnable frontier to viewing it as a long term strategic investment. A new national context. The political environment changed significantly after the 2014 general election. Narendra Modi's victory created momentum that extended well beyond where the states traditionally dominated. For the first time, many voters in eastern India viewed the Bharatiya Janata Party not as a regional outsider, but as the governing party at the center. National power changed perceptions of viability. Political workers who might previously have joined regional parties began considering BJP as a serious career option. Business communications became more willing to engage with BJP leaders. Civil servants understood that the party would remain influential at the national level for years to come. This shift in perception mattered enormously. Politics is influenced by expectations. Correction. Politics is influenced by exceptions. Voters often prefer parties they believe are capable of winning because they assume such parties can better deliver resources, influence, and development. As the BJP expanded nationally, its credibility in Bengal also increased. The party's parliamentary performance in Bengal improved marked in 2014. Although it didn't come close to controlling the state, it established that a meaningful section of the electorate was willing to support it. That result encouraged the BJP to invest more heavily in Bengal than ever before, building an organization from the ground up. One of the most misunderstood aspects of the Bharatiya Janata Party's rise is the belief that it was driven primarily by television campaigns or speeches by national leaders. In reality, the party spent years constructing grassroots organization. Every political party requires what strategists often describe as organizational infrastructure. This includes booth committees, mandal committees, district leadership, training programs, volunteer recruitment, data collection, fundraising mechanisms, and communication channels capable of funding independently of media coverage. The BJP expanded each of these components. Booth committees became the foundation of the party's strategy. Rather than relying solely on district leaders, the BJP sought to establish workers responsible for individual polling stations. These workers collected local information, identified supporters, communicated government policies, organized meetings, and maintained regular contact with voters. This process was slow and labor intensive. It required recruiting thousands of individuals willing to devote significant time to political activity without immediate electoral success. Unlike election campaigns that only last a few weeks, organizational expansion continues throughout the year. Local workers attend festivals, community events, religious gatherings, business meetings, and social functions. They become familiar faces rather than temporary campaigners. Over time, the sustained presence reduced one of the greatest assets BJP. Over time, this sustained presence reduced one of BJP's greatest historical weaknesses: its image as an external political force disconnected from everyday Bengali society. The role of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangha. Any discussion of the BJP's organizational expansion in Bengal must also examine the role of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangha (RSS). The RSS operates independently of the BJP but has historically provided ideological training and organizational experience for many BJP leaders. In states where the RSS has an extensive grassroots presence, the BJP often benefits from a network of volunteers familiar with continuity and community mobilization. For decades, the RSS has a comparatively limited footprint in West Bengal compared to states such as Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, or Maharashtra. However, during the 2010s, its presence expanded steadily. New shakas were established in many districts. Educational activities, social service programs, community outreach increased. Volunteers engaged in relief work during floods and cyclones, organized cultural events, and expanded contact with youth organizations. Supporters viewed these efforts as long term nation building and social engagement. Critics argued that they also helped expand the ideological reach of Hindu nationalism within Bengal. Regardless of perspective, most analysts agree that the growth of the RSS contributed to the BJP's improving organizational capacity. The significance of this expansion became evident during elections. A large volunteer base allowed the Bharatiya Janata Party to deploy polling agents more effectively, monitor voting stations, communicate rapidly with headquarters, and mobilize supporters on election day. Electoral success is often determined by organizational efficiency rather by campaign rhetoric alone, expanding beyond traditional strongholds. Initially, the BJP's strongest support came from North Bengal. Several factors contributed to this pattern. This region had distinct historical, linguistic, and ethnic as well as economic characteristics. Migration patterns differed from southern Bengal. Border issues, infrastructure development, tea garden employment, and regional identity influenced political preferences. The BJP successfully connected these regional concerns with broader national schemes. However, winning North Bengal alone could not deliver control of the state. The party therefore focused on expanding into districts where it had previously been almost absent. Jangal Mahal became one of such regions. Following years of Maoist violence and security operations, many voters prioritized stability, infrastructure, employment, and governance. The BJP sought to position itself as an alternative capable of addressing these concerns. Similarly, the party invested heavily in districts surrounding Kolkata and semi urban areas experiencing rapid demographic and economic change. These regions contain growing middle class populations, younger voters, middle class hometowns, small entrepreneurs, and professionals whose political priorities often differed from those of earlier generations. Instead of relying on single nationwide message, the BJP increasingly adopted region specific campaign strategies. This flexibility marked an important evolution in its electoral approach. Refugee politics and citizenship debates. Another important dimension of Bengal politics involved refugee communities, particularly those whose families had migrated from present-day Bangladesh after partition or during later periods of communal violence and political instability. Citizenship became a major political issue. The BJP argued that persecuted religious minorities who had sought refuge in India deserved a clear pathway to citizenship. Supporters viewed this as addressing a long-standing humanitarian issues affecting refugee families. Critics, however, expressed concerns about the implementation of citizenship policies and their broader implications. Opposition parties argued that certain legislative proposals created uncertainty and could disproportionately affect vulnerable populations. These debates became increasingly polarized. For many refugee communities, however, the BJP's messaging resonated because it addressed issues that they considered unresolved for decades. The political impact varied across the regions, but citizenship debates undoubtedly became one component of the BJP's broader electoral coalition. The psychological barrier begins to break. Perhaps the most important transformation during this period was psychological rather than electoral. For many decades, many Bengalis simply assumed that the BJP could never govern the state. Political expectations influence voter behavior. If a party is perceived as permanently incapable of winning, many potential supporters hesitate to vote for it. They fear wasting their vote or isolating themselves politically. As the Bharatiya Janata Party expanded nationally and improved its performance within Bengal, this assumption began to weaken. As the Bharatiya Janata Party expanded nationally and improved its performance within Bengal, this assumption began to weaken. Every election produced incremental gains, every parliamentary seat increased confidence, every municipal breakthrough demonstrated organizational growth. Every high profile defection signaled that established politicians now viewed the Bharatiya Janata Party as a viable alternative. Momentum itself became a political resource. By the late 2010s, Bengal politics had effectively transformed from a one-party dominant system into a competitive two-party contest. The left continued to lose influence. The Congress became increasingly marginalized. The BJP replaced them as the principal opposition. This realignment fundamentally changed electoral calculations. For the first time in decades, voters dissatisfied with the ruling government could unite behind a single alternative rather than dividing their support among multiple opposition parties. That consolidation would become one of the defining characteristics of Bengal's political transformation, the making of a credible challenger. By the mid 2020s, the BJP had accomplished something that many political observers had once considered nearly impossible. It had transformed itself from a peripheral political force into a credible contender for state power. This transformation didn't occur because of one charismatic speech, one election, or one controversy. It resulted from years of organizational investment, regional adaptation, ideological outreach, recruitment of local leaders, expansion of voluntary networks, and careful construction of electoral infrastructure. Yet, organization alone could not guarantee victory. A strong opposition also requires an incumbent government facing glowing public. A strong opposition requires A strong opposition also requires an incumbent government facing growing public dissatisfaction. Over time, that dissatisfaction would intensify through a combination of corruption scandals, administrative controversies, economic concerns, and perceptions of government and governance failures. These issues would increasingly dominate public discourse and create the political environment in which organizational strength would be converted into electoral successes. Part 3. The accumulation of anti-incumbency and why the Trinamool Congress began to lose ground politically. Chapter 3. The nature of anti-incumbency. Every government begins its tenure with political capital. Electoral victory creates optimism, goodwill, and expectations. Citizens often grant newly elected administrations time to implement policies, overcome inherited problems, and establish their governing style. However, the political capital is finite. As years pass, expectations evolve. Voters no longer compare the government with its predecessors. Instead, they compare it with the promises it made and the outcomes it delivered. This process is known as anti-incumbency. It is one of the most powerful forces in democratic politics. Anti-incumbency doesn't imply universal dissatisfaction, nor does it mean that every policy had failed. Rather, it reflects the gradual accumulation of grievances that, taken individually, may appear manageable but collectively alter public perception. A government may continue to command local loyal support while simultaneously losing confidence among undecided voters. These marginal shifts often determine electoral outcomes. The Trinamool Congress entered office in 2011 with extraordinary public goodwill. It had ended 34 years of left front rule, symbolized political renewal. For several years, the government maintained considerable popularity through welfare programs, infrastructure improvements, and Mamata Banerjee's personal image as an accessible leader. Yet, as the years passed, governing became more difficult. Administrative mistakes that might have been forgiven during the first term received greater scrutiny in later years. Allegations that once appeared isolated began to interpret as symptoms of broader institutional problems. Opposition parties, civil society organizations, and the media increasingly focused on governance rather than the historical achievements of ending left rule. The central political question gradually shifted from whether the TMC had been preferable to the left front in 2011 to whether it remained the best choice for Bengal's future. The burden of long-term rule. Political longevity brings advantages. Experienced governments understand administrative procedures, maintain stable leadership, and often possess extensive networks capable of implementing programs quickly. However, longevity also creates structural vulnerabilities. After many years in office, ruling parties often become deeply intertwined with state institutions. Local political leaders acquire influence over administrative processes. Internal accountability weakens because electoral success becomes expected rather than earned. Young leaders struggle to advance with established hierarchies. Decision making becomes centralized. Innovation declines. These tendencies are not unique to West Bengal. Similar patterns have appeared in governments across democratic systems worldwide. In Bengal, critics increasingly argued that local party leaders exercise disproportionate influence over everyday administrations. Allegations emerged concerning municipal contracts, local development projects, recruitment procedures, and access to public services. While the severity and prevalence of these issues varied across districts, repeated accusations contributed to a growing narrative that political connections had become increasingly important in navigating government institutions. Supporters of the Trinamool Congress rejected many of these allegations, arguing that opposition parties exaggerated isolated incidents for electoral gain. They pointed out continued welfare delivery, infrastructure expansion, and improvements in several development indicators as evidence that governance remained effective. One of the most politically significant controversies concerned teacher recruitment and appointments in state education institutions. Investigation into alleged irregularities in recruitment procedures led to arrests of prominent political figures and administrative officials. Court proceedings and investigative actions continued over an extended period, ensuring that the issue remained visible in public discourse.